happy Friday. Welcome to episode 16 of A Slice of Pie podcast. My name is Kat Loftus, and we are here to tell the stories of the people and places of Pawleys Island, Murrells Inlet, and Georgetown. This week, our guest is Sammy Grayson. Sammy's been around a long time, and he's been a boat captain and a realtor and done a lot of things in our area. But why I interviewed Sammy is because he's got a great story about the Gray Man, a real story about the Gray Man who visited his parents' beach house right before Hurricane Hugo. And as you might imagine, the house did not get damaged. It's a great story. You're going to want to tune in and listen to this. So I'm very appreciative of Sammy for letting me come to his house where he and Celia Powell now live, his wife Celia. Just had a nice back porch talk and talked about his children and grandchildren, and his time as a boat captain, and the times in Pawleys Island when there was hardly anybody here in the wintertime, and what it used to be like when Pawleys Island just had a 2-lane road going down the highway. So you're going to enjoy hearing these stories and hearing about the Gray Man, and we do talk a little bit of real estate, but mostly it's just fun. So sit back and enjoy episode 16 of A Slice of Pie. Hi, Sammy. How you doing?
Fine, Kat. How are you?
Thank you so much for coming onto my podcast, A Slice of Pie. Do you know what a podcast is?
Well, I do now since you just told me.
Well, I hope you'll watch this podcast after we film it. But the reason why I asked Sammy to join us on the podcast is because I know he lived in Pawleys Island a long time, and your parents had a beach house there, right?
Yeah.
And I know that he knows a good story about the Gray Man. And since Halloween week is coming up, I thought that'd be an appropriate time to tell that story, which is kind of spooky. I think it's a really good story. And also, I'll tell another real estate story about you, and when we get to that point. But let us start by, Sammy, would you tell us where you were born and where'd you go to school?
Well, I was born in Georgetown in 1954 in September, which was about 2 months since this is all leading up to hurricanes and stuff. 1954 ahead of Hurricane Hazel.
Okay.
And that was in October of 54. So.
But what month were you born in?
September.
September, and then Hazel came in October.
October,
okay.
Yeah. It's almost, I've heard the story so many times, I feel like I remember it. But,
yeah.
But I do remember my parents talking about it and how Pawleys was devastated from that.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at the creek and seeing it all, or at least them telling me, from what I can tell, and is all the things that were in the creek and houses, boats, junk, stuff like that. So anyway, I was born in Georgetown.
So during that Hurricane Hazel, did they have a beach house then?
No.
They did not have one then.
We got the beach house, I think, around 1960. I want to say 65, 66, somewhere in there.
You know what's interesting about hurricanes and destruction is that the town always builds back, and it's never stopped Pawleys Island from being a great place to go.
Yeah.
So it might take a while to get it back in shape, but people always build back. So that's the good news about hurricanes. Okay, and so where did you go to school?
I went to elementary school at Bynum Elementary.
Which is now, I think, the sheriff's office department or something.
Exactly. Like that. And then after I think 7th grade is when I went to Low Country. Or not Low Country, I think back then it was called Winyah Academy.
Winyah Academy, yeah.
And then graduated there and went to Wofford College for a couple of years. And then to College of Charleston for a small time. So that's my...
Okay, all right. So then, what made you move to Pawleys? So you lived in, when you were married to Susan, y'all lived in Pawleys Island, right? So what made you move to Pawleys Island?
Well, we grew up there, so...
Did you grow up in Pawleys Island?
Yes.
Although you were born in Georgetown.
I was born in Georgetown, but my parents had a house at Pawleys and in Georgetown.
Okay.
So at school, when school started, we'd end up moving back to Georgetown. But as soon as school was out, we were at the beach full time.
Okay. What do you remember from your summers?
Oh, that's fishing and hunting. But mostly since I was real young then, it was mostly fishing. The hunting I did was when Daddy would take me in the afternoons or whatever, or on weekends. So.
What did y'all hunt? What did you hunt?
We hunted everything that I can think of. We hunted ducks, doves, quail. We had quail dogs and whatnot. But as far as fishing goes, I'm going to switch subject a little bit. They would leave me and go to work because I was too young to go to work with them, and they worked at our office supply store in Georgetown. So I would stay at the beach and fish all day or whatever. So
were you in a boat or just on the side?
We had a little boat I had to put in with a lawnmower before I could drive.
With a riding lawnmower?
Riding lawnmower.
Okay, so you pull the
Yeah, to the landing, which was right near the house.
Uh-huh.
And so then either I was getting in the boat or I was going on the beach fishing, for whatever out there, or fishing in the creek for shrimp and fish or whatever,
So you
clams
could,
and stuff.
what's the youngest age you remember fishing in that creek by yourself?
Probably 7 or 8, maybe.
Did you ever have a friend
Maybe
with
10.
you?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember who that would be, but but probably about 10, really, I guess.
So you knew how to operate the john boat and everything.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was a john boat.
Yeah.
Like
It was like a 9-horse motor.
Uh-huh.
Later on, say 12 or 14, I was driving it all the time and sneaking out in the ocean, even through the inlet. So
that's kind of a rough crossing when you have to cross over into the ocean.
Yeah, I'm not real smart, even as a kid. But we did go out there and did catch some fish in those john boats. So.
Did you bring the fish back to?
Yeah, I would clean the fish and sometimes help my mother cook them. But I'd usually have fish or something in the afternoons when they got home.
Every day?
A lot of days.
Did you eat much shrimp? Did you catch shrimp?
Yeah.
Did you bait for shrimp?
No, that wasn't even. There wasn't any baiting back then. We seined for shrimp at low tide.
So you would get in the creek?
Yes.
And did you have shoes on?
Yes.
To prevent the oyster cuts,
right?
So you and the friend, or you and somebody would be seining? Can you explain that to our listeners who don't know what seining is?
Well, a seine net, ours probably was maybe 30 feet long, and you just pull it through the water and then pull it up on the bank and get what you could out of it.
So you're on one side of the net, and somebody else on the other side. So imagine if somebody would imagine like a volleyball net or something like that, and you both have it, and you're going through the creek,
dragging it
at low tide,
keeping it close to the bottom.
And explain to everybody why you have to wear shoes.
Well, the shoes obviously are for keeping from getting cut.
Yeah, because an oyster shell cut is awful.
It is awful. Yeah,
it's dirty and it slices like a knife. It's bad.
It takes forever to get over.
Have you had an oyster shell cut?
Probably many.
I've had an oyster shell cut. It's quick. It happens quick.
Yeah.
So once you would seine, and how long do you have to walk when you're seining? How long do you walk?
Well, it depends on how long a stretch or what the shrimping is like at the time. But a lot of times the sandbars would be pretty lengthy, so you could do a long pull or you could just do a short pull, depending on if you were catching a lot of shrimp or not. You want to get out of the water if you're catching a lot, or see something you want to get out of the net quick, it'd be a short pull.
Is the netting on a seine net, is it fine? Is it fine, or is it?
Well, just guessing, I'd say that it's about 3/8 of an inch.
Yeah. Okay. So it's pretty small.
Yeah, I don't even know if I don't think there were any legal or not legal.
It's not big like a hammock. The openings are much smaller.
Yeah, much smaller. But I don't think there was any limit on how many shrimp you could catch, or whether there was a limit on the size of the mesh, like there is today.
I didn't even know that there was a limit on the size of the mesh. So if somebody wanted to buy a seine net, would you go somewhere like Pawleys Island Supplies or Pawleys Island Outdoors? Or?
I haven't even seen a seine net anywhere in years. My neighbor's got one, but he's had it in his garage for years. He hadn't used it in years. But the last one I saw was probably at Merle's Inlet over here.
Yeah. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is a lot of work.
So I guess if you were 10 or 12 and had a seine net, you would probably only go if the net got too heavy. You would have to bring it back to the bank.
Yeah. So, but we never caught that many shrimp. It was always just enough to eat.
Well, it would be shrimp and other things, I guess.
Yeah, there'd usually be some mullet or pickers or something like that in it.
What's a picker?
It is I've heard them called sea bream or sailor's choice, some stuff like that. But it's just a fish in the creek. It's common.
But you would never have a crab in there?
Yeah, you'd have crabs too. Yeah.
And would you throw anything back?
We throw whatever we didn't want to eat back. Yeah.
So
or what might be too small.
Right. So if you had the shrimp, who was cleaning the shrimp?
I did.
When you pinched the head off, did you just throw it back in the creek? What did you do?
No, usually, depends. Like I said, if we're catching a bunch and we're trying to get back out there, remember all of this is in a tide and we're way away from the actual landing where we get in the water. So before the tide changes, you got to do what you're going to do and get back over there while you can still walk back.
Oh.
So if you're in a hurry, you just take all the shrimp heads and all back to the house.
Okay.
And otherwise, if we just have a few, we'd probably pick the heads off and throw them back there. Okay. Yeah.
Did you do that? Did you seine up through your 20s?
Oh yeah. I guess the last time I've been seining was probably 10 or 15 years ago.
So you did it a long time.
Long time, yeah.
Um, so you fished and you got in the creek a lot, and so that was your summers when you were growing up.
Yeah, and I surfed too.
Surfed,
Oh yeah.
uh-huh.
And I didn't care much about sitting around on the beach, so I was more project oriented. I'd either be fishing or something, or surfing.
Do you remember some of the people you were surfing with?
Oh my gosh. Seems like well, later, not early years, but later, like Rod Joseph was one of them. He and I went off on a trip together. Um, geez, a lot of people. Right now, I'm almost blank with that, but a lot of people from Georgetown surf.
Were y'all surfing by the pier?
Sometimes. Most of the surfing I did was down near our house, which is at the Broken Growing area on the south end.
On the south end.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like when you're coming down South Atlantic Avenue and it branches off into 3 roads. Take a left and that goes to the Broken Growing.
Okay. I know where you are now.
Yeah.
Like I think people call that the bird's nest.
It's area. The bird's nest was where our house was.
Okay. So you had a great growing up summer, didn't you? Did you work in Pawleys Island?
Not until probably in my mid-teens. And I started fishing offshore with some people, mating on boats and stuff.
So you were working on a boat.
Yeah.
Are you old enough to remember the Pawleys Pavilion?
Yeah.
You do remember?
I remember going there. I wasn't old enough to drink in there and stuff, but I remember being sent in there to get my sister out by my parents and tell her to go home.
Get my sister out. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, we might have to speak a little bit louder since the AC cut on. Okay, so you're doing that, and then you go to school. And do you remember any crazy adventures you did, or any kind of great memories from that time, or any stories from that time?
Wow, it seems like to me everything was a great memory because so many people were off doing stuff at home or going to camp and stuff like that. But that was basically my camp.
Do you remember King's Funland?
Yeah, yeah, we'd go there. Not all the time, but sometimes. That's on the other end of the island at the time. Actually, I think there was two places there, King's Funland and another one, and I can't remember the name of that one. But anyway, yeah, we'd go there occasionally.
So in the wintertime, when there was no vacation, was Pawleys Island just dead?
Empty.
No one.
When I was in college at Wofford, for instance, we did an interim, and I was at Pawleys Island doing roping hammocks and stuff. Actually, what I was roping was chairs, but I could have roped a hammock. But anyway, we came home and roped chairs for our interim and stayed at the beach house. There was nobody at the beach. I think there was one other guy staying on the north end.
This is like January or something?
Yeah, in January. Interim lasted for a month at Wofford.
They still have that?
Yes. Yeah. My son went there.
Yeah.
So he's been on different kinds of interims too.
Right.
And most more fun than I went to. But
they go to exotic places now.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you were there on the island, nobody was there.
And nobody was there.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I remember riding in the boat and shooting marsh hens, behind Pawleys and some ducks. But I remember actually riding down the road at Pawleys, sitting on the hood of the car shooting marsh hens.
Who was driving?
I don't recall. But that was when we were able to drive.
Yeah. What is a marsh hen? Because I don't even know.
It's like a rail or something, some kind of, I don't know what the real name is for them. But
is it as big as a hen?
Well, it's a rail. It's kind of like a plover, but bigger.
Is it bigger than a chicken?
No.
It's not bigger than a chicken?
It is about the size of a small duck.
A small duck, thank you.
Yes.
A small duck.
Yeah. And so we would ride, and the tide would have to be high. And when the tide gets real high, the marsh hens don't have any places to sit, so they would go towards the road or on little islands or docks or whatever. But you could ride down the road when the tide was real high, especially in September and stuff. When the season came open, they'd be coming along the side of the road. So when the car came, they would just jump up right there by the road, and then you shoot them, and then you go get them.
Do you eat them?
Yeah.
What does it taste like?
They're not that good.
Does it taste like duck?
I'd say so.
Kind of fat like that.
Yeah.
I don't see marsh hens anymore.
Well, my son was just shooting some in Charleston behind Mount Pleasant. Yeah.
Do they swim?
Yeah.
They do?
Yep. They have long legs. It's like an overgrown sandpiper. That's what they look like.
I'm gonna go find. I want to see a Martian.
Yeah.
I've never seen one. I can't believe I haven't. If I've seen it, I didn't know what I was looking at.
Right.
I just put it out.
You've probably seen them. They're common.
What color is it?
They're like their plumage in the winter, at least. I don't know what they look like in the summer so much, but they're kind of a brownish.
Okay.
Yeah. They blend in pretty well.
Yeah. Okay.
You don't see them before they jump up, hardly. They just appear.
They just appear. Okay. So you're at home during your interim time, and there's nobody here. I do remember I think it was in the 80s, coming down one time, and it was just like a forest all the way down, like from you're coming from Ocean Drive or Myrtle Beach, right? There was just woods all the way down. Like Brooklyn Gardens is woods, and it was woods all the way down. There might have been a sign pointing into Litchfield, or a sign pointing, and I think Pawleys Island Supplies was there.
Well, Pawleys Island Supply was there in another form, but it was a hardware store when Doc Lashcott owned it. He was one of the original ones, I think. Might be wrong about that, but I remember the other people that owned it too a long time ago. But that was there for a good while, and right next door, of course, was Frank Marlowe's, and he was the grocery store. So
and the hammock shops were here.
The hammock shop was down the street. Yeah.
Right.
Now, not in the way it is today. Of course, it was Doc's nursery. It was actually a nursery.
Oh, I didn't know
he grew plants and stuff there, and had some set up there where he sold hammocks and things like that too.
But not as fancy as it is today.
Oh no, none of that was there.
No restaurant.
Some of those buildings were there. In fact, the long building that Keenan's jewelry store is in right now, I think was part of the early hammock shop days where they were making the hammocks.
So let's talk about what Keenan. So you have two children, Keenan and
Wilson,
right? And how old's Keenan now? 30s?
Keenan would be, she was born in 87, so what is that, 35?
That's
about right.
So she and her husband, Jason, who were living in they're still living in McClellanville, but unfortunately, John Henry Whitmire passed away, and he had Whitmire's fine jewelry in the hammock shop, and so they had an opportunity to buy that?
Yeah, they were actually talking to John Henry before he passed away. And after he did pass away, his brother met with him and started talking to him about buying it.
So do Keenan and Jason, do they still own Loy Harn Jewelers in Mount Pleasant?
Yeah.
So they have a jewelry store in Mount Pleasant, and then Whitmire Fine Jewelry.
They're burning the tires off the cars.
So do they split, and one's at one store and one's at another store? How do they do it?
They do it back and forth. It depends on the need. I think Jason does a lot of the repairs and things like that. Not much of the sales. Keenan's the sales side. So she works with the employees and sees the schedules and helps arrange all that kind of stuff. She manages the sales force.
So you have they probably have a manager for each
one.
I need to interview Keenan, get Keenan on my podcast. I'll find out more about that. But you're doing great. I'm so glad that a local person took over John Henry's business. That's great to know. So for any of the listeners that are listening out there, if you want to meet Keenan, go by, is it still called Whitmire's? Whitmire's Fine Jewelry in the hammock shops, and ask for Keenan Harn. Is that her name? I'm going to say Keenan Grayson, Keenan Harn. Yeah.
Harn.
Okay. So let's go back to you for just a second. So I don't know how we got onto the hammock shop. But anyway, so it was completely empty on the highway except for hammock shop, where Doc's hammock shop is, the hardware store, and then Marlowe's grocery store, right?
Yeah, and it was a 2-lane highway.
And a 2-lane highway. No traffic lights?
No traffic.
No traffic lights.
At all. I remember when they were building that highway, I thought, in the wintertime, there's no reason for cars to be there. There's nowhere to go. Nobody's going anywhere. But you can walk out to the stoplight at where L's Hardware, Doc's Lashcott's hardware store, and all that was, and aim a rifle down the highway either way and never hit a car.
So it was 2-lane for a long time.
It was 2-lane.
And you thought it was ridiculous when they were building the highway? Gosh.
And now, of course, we need a quadruple lane.
Oh, God, we need an overpass. It's awful now. I can't believe. We used to be able to notice the difference, like between the summertime traffic and then when it's like, even when I moved here in the early 90s, I could pull out on the highway and not look.
Right.
But it's so different now.
It's way different.
Yeah, very different. It's not bad. It's just different.
I find it pretty bad.
Don't say that. I don't want you to say that. The people are still nice. Don't say that. There are very many nice people in Pawleys Island. It's just that you just remember a much more simpler time.
Right.
Okay. So one of the reasons, I'm going to talk about before we get to that. So I was living in Greenville, South Carolina. That's where I'm from. And I came down to the beach and I met my husband, Pat. And we were looking to find a place to live before we got married and after we got married. And we had a lot of nice realtors show us houses and lots and neighborhoods. And my husband would never decide on anything. I was getting so frustrated, so frustrated. And then he came home from working at the bank one day and told me that you had taken him to see a lot in Devanue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you were the one to convince him. I'm thinking, Sammy Grayson, of all people, just a nice, kind, non-aggressive person, happens to get my husband and show him a lot in Devanue. And that's the one we want. Mm-hmm. That's the one we bought, which is great. And now we still live there.
Mm-hmm.
About 30 years later, we're still living on that lot. So thank you for that. Yeah. I was getting really frustrated. So I'm glad you came along.
Well, I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, I'm glad that worked out too. So when you were a realtor, who were you working for?
Well, I started out with Johnny Weaver and Gary Roberts.
Roberts.
And that's where I was. Well, Johnny was the real estate teacher, I guess you would say. And so I just stayed with them for a year or two, and then Doc convinced me he was going to open another real estate office, and he convinced me to go with him and Chip and open another one. So we did that.
So you're over at Lashcott.
Yeah.
How long were you with Lashcott?
Probably about 10 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Something like that.
Well, good. Okay. Now, tell us about your children real quick and your grandchildren.
Children and grandchildren.
Okay.
Well, I have 3 grandchildren. Keenan's children. They're all 3 girls. Susan Grace is 7 months. And Mary Alice is about, I think she's 9, and I think Loyal is 8.
Okay, so
and I may be wrong.
Who's oldest?
At Mary Alice.
Mary Alice is, how old do you say she is?
She's 8. She's 8.
She's 8, and then
Loyal
is
7.
7. So are they a year apart?
A year apart.
And then the baby is how?
7 months.
And what's the baby's name?
Susan Grace.
Oh, name for Susan. Yeah, I love Susan. And I was so sad when she passed away recently. Yeah. She was a fun person for sure. I love Susan. And then tell everybody about your children and how old they are. So.
Well, Wilson's now 23, and he's running a business in Allendale.
Is he?
Yeah, it's called Carolina Marine Restorations. He started that a couple years ago while he was in school, and he's got about, 10 guys working in that.
Are they restoring boats?
Yeah. And he's also interested and involved in wetland mitigation.
Oh, yeah.
With another company. And
well, that's big time.
Yeah, he started that I think he got into that while he was at Wofford too, and met some pretty interesting people, and they've encouraged him. Well, he works for them, basically, so he's actually working in 2 different businesses right now.
Yeah, so for our listeners that don't understand what the wetland mitigation is all about, sometimes somebody wants to build on a piece of property.
Yeah.
It turns out that some or all the property might be considered wetlands.
Yeah, and it could be a bank, it could be a big company, it could be an industry or whatever, but if they're going to destroy or misplace a wetland area, then the federal government, or I think it's how it works.
It's an agency, some agency.
They have mandated that they replace that somehow with another wetland.
That's right.
In my mind, though, I'm not sure how replacing it with a wetland that's already existing makes it work.
Right, and I know several buildings in our area that they've done that.
And you have to go buy from a mitigation bank.
Right. Well, sometimes, I'm wondering, if you look at the local Walmarts, how they have the ponds around them, I'm wondering, were they mitigating that space? Because
I think it could be, but I think a lot of that, and I don't know, but I think, as I remember when I was in real estate, our local government especially, like Waccamaw Planning, they demanded that there be so many drain off ponds and stuff.
Yeah.
So it probably had nothing to do with wetland mitigation.
I like to tell people that as if I think I know something, but I do know.
Well, I don't know either for sure, but I'm pretty sure about
I do know some larger buildings that have been built in our area that they did have to mitigate the wetlands, and they did have to turn part of that property into a pond so they could build on this other part of the property. Yeah. So that's what that's all about. When you mitigate wetlands, you just have to reserve another part of the space for you're exchanging.
Right.
It's like an exchange.
And the owner of the mitigation bank doesn't actually sell the land. They still own the land. They're just buying credits, basically, as I understand it.
Yeah. So it's just something that
We're talking about something we don't even know
Yeah, I don't
anything
even.
about.
Let's get off that. I just know it's something that has to be done if you want to build on wetlands or something like that. You have to mitigate it. Moving right along. So you did help us to buy our lot. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was sitting eating supper with y'all one night, and I don't know who the other couple was with us, but we came upon the story of the gray man. And you told us a story that I thought was phenomenal. It was a great story. Something about your parents' beach house. So
Yeah.
I want you to tell our listeners that story.
Well, I guess a lot of people know what the gray man is. Apparently, the gray man, I don't know his name or if he has a name, but somewhere I think around 1822, he was coming home to marry his girlfriend, and he was stuck in the mud or something on his horse in Pawleys, trying to get across the marsh to Pawleys Island where she was, and died. And so he did come to her before a hurricane in the 1800s.
He appeared to her.
And this is story after story after story. It's probably muddied up a little bit, but he appeared to her and told her that she couldn't answer any questions, or he couldn't tell her anything but to get off the island, get out of here. There's a bad storm coming, and that's all he would tell her. She left, and her house was spared. The only house that was there left back then. And so the story went on after a few more hurricanes. Any sightings that were seen, this same thing happened. Whoever saw him, their house was spared.
Like a mysterious man.
It was. Some people described him as a mist or a gray mist, and some people described him looking like a Confederate soldier or something like that, or a soldier, but a gray suited man or something.
They will come and just tell you to evacuate or you need to get out.
Yes, and if you listen to them, then your house would be spared.
Right. So what was your situation?
My situation, that really wasn't a situation, but in 1989, Hurricane Hugo came. I think it was September of 23rd, I believe, something like that.
A big storm.
Big storm, and but it really didn't hit our area like it hit Allendale and Charleston, McClellanville.
Well, we did have a lot of devastation.
We had a lot of devastation. We did, but the actual storm center,
the
eye came in at Allendale.
It did.
Yeah. So in 1989, we were at the beach, and there were a lot of houses there then that aren't like they are today. These nice houses that are there today were not like that. Yeah. Everybody had built them out of their pockets, basically.
Yeah.
So a bunch of small houses are
very simple beach houses.
Simple beach houses.
Right.
And the fellow that lived behind us, towards the east of us, just in our backyard, basically, claimed to have seen the gray man, and we had heard that, and so we all evacuated for Hugo, knowing that we were going to be close to seeing a pretty bad flood tide and all that kind of stuff.
Was he serious when he told you he saw the gray man?
I'm pretty sure.
He was?
Yeah. Seems so.
This is before the storm.
Yeah, and so his house was spared, and his house was on the east side of us. I mean, like within 50 feet or maybe 80 feet of ours. And so a lot of the houses that were scantily built back then were just floated off or broke up and went all around. But they were stacked up and sorted out. You know, they looked like bad firewood everywhere.
Yeah.
But his house and our house were together, and there was nothing wrong with either house.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And so many of them were just swept away.
It looked like it kind of looked like driftwood floating around.
Yeah.
It was just like sticks floating around. It was bad. But your parents' house was saved, and his house was saved. Do you remember his name?
I'm not sure, but I think it was Bert Hawley. That I know he lived at that house, and or at least stayed there a good bit. I'm pretty sure it was him.
That's amazing, because if anybody, you can go on YouTube and see where the governor was flying along the coast. I think it was Carroll Campbell might have been the governor back then. And just, house after house after house was just.
Well, even as far up here as Surfside and all, everything's built on the sandbar.
Right.
Just like south end of Pawleys, basically.
That's right. Yeah.
And so anything on those sandbars were just, I think there's something in the Bible about building your house on sand. Don't build your house on sand.
Well, it's being done all the time.
Yes.
So anyway, so that's pretty interesting. But you didn't see him, but it was, you think Bert Hawley that saw him.
Yeah, and it might not have even been Bert, but I'm pretty sure it was. But I remember him being there. There was some other people that came and went from that house. So I'm pretty sure he was there about that time.
Do you remember how old you were then?
Well, in 1989, I was 30 something.
Yeah.
I was in the real estate business, and I'd been off to school too. So
Uh-huh.
89, I was probably 30 something.
Uh-huh. So after you finished selling real estate, what did you do then?
Well, I went to work with an eye company, um, traveling, selling eye care to nursing homes and stuff
Okay, you
for
did that.
about a year.
Okay.
Hmm.
Uh-huh. All right.
And then from there, I went. Well, I was in real estate about 10 years, and then I did that eye care thing, and then I had been a boat captain forever.
Oh,
So
I forgot that you were a boat
I went
captain.
ahead and I got an offer to go somewhere and full time, so I did that
Uh-huh.
for another 10 years.
Were you a boat captain here? Did you have to go down to Florida or?
I was always a boat captain here from I think 1979 was when I was first licensed, but I had been fishing and mating on boats before that here. Left, and of course other times we'd travel and I'd go other places, Bahamas, up north. We delivered some boats here and there.
When somebody is I guess you're licensed to be a boat captain. You have to be licensed.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you're a boat captain, are you a boat captain for one person that owns the boat? Is that how that works? Or?
No, you can run anything. Your license, my license is a master's license, so I can run passengers and stuff like that too. But when I first had my license, I was only licensed to carry 6 passengers, which a lot of people are. But that's plenty to have for doing what they do. I mean, all you got to do is get in the boat, take 6 people fishing.
Right.
So, but otherwise, you have to be licensed to carry anybody for hire or do anything on a boat for hire.
Because I know some of the fellows that live around here, they're boat captains for those large fishing boats, and they take people offshore for the offshore fishing, and there's only one captain for those boats.
Yeah, I did that too.
Yeah. So have you done a lot of offshore fishing?
Over the years, like I said, I started in the 70s, and up until about 5 years ago, I was fishing quite a bit.
I've never been offshore. What is it like? Is it?
Well, it can be fun or it can be not so fun, and I've of course had both times, but it gets bumpy sometimes, especially when you're a long ways out away. Sometimes things happen and you can't get home quick enough, stuff like that.
Have you ever had to call the Coast Guard?
Not too well. I take that back. We did call Bahamas Air Sea Rescue to tow us in one time when we were in the Bahamas and got stranded.
Have you ever been in high seas?
Oh yeah.
Like how high?
That particular time when we got towed in, I think the seas probably were at least 15 feet.
That's awful. Oh my gosh, that's awful. Was it in the middle of a storm?
Yeah.
That's so awful. You think you're gonna die?
I thought that we were in a bad situation. The motors quit, and we didn't have any steerage, and so we were at the mercy of the waves, basically breaking down on top of us sideways. So, but I was in a 46-foot boat, which is not big by any means these days, but it was big enough to keep us from turning over, I guess.
Gosh. So when they came to get you and rescue, they just towed you in?
Yeah, they didn't know where we were, and we didn't know where we were either, and so
how'd they find you?
They found us by dead reckoning, and kind of we explained to them where we left from and where we were going and where we thought we might be. We were about 15 miles out of out of the Bahamas at the time, in the Northwest Channel. So
were you? How are you communicating with them?
By radio only. We didn't have any over there back then. You didn't have the navigation stuff that we have today. So basically, navigation was mostly like compass and charts.
Aren't you fortunate that your radio didn't go out?
Oh yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
You made it by the skin of your teeth. Well, good. I'm glad you made it back. So you don't go in the boat anymore, do you?
No, I think I'm about done with that. Getting a little too creaky for it.
Too creaky. But you've had a lot of good memories, though.
Yes.
You haven't seen any ghosts lately?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
But
none that I'll admit to.
Is there anything I haven't asked you about your life or growing up here that you would like to tell us about? Is there anything else?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I just always enjoyed being here and doing the things that we were allowed to do and getting away with a lot of stuff that you couldn't really believe. Like going fishing and hunting by yourself and all that. I wouldn't turn young kids away doing that these days.
Did you ever ride on the dunes? Did you ever take your cars on the beach?
Yes.
You did? Isn't that crazy? How did you get on the beach? Did you go to the south end and come off?
Well, the time that I remember doing it was at Deputy. And we did sort of get in a little bit of trouble for that. and that happened at night too.
Uh-huh.
Just out, and that's some college friends, and all of us were just riding, having a good time, and jumping over the dunes and riding up and down the beach and all that.
What kind of vehicle were you in?
I was in my regular car.
Like a sedan?
Yeah.
It wasn't a Jeep or anything like that.
No.
You were just going over the dunes in a sedan.
Yeah.
I bet that was fun.
It was at the time until later.
Oh, yeah. So your memory of Debbie then, was it just houses that were in condos near the front of the beach? Do you remember anything about that then?
Back then, at that time, Debbie was just being developed.
Okay.
Very few houses. I think some of the villas were there, but not many houses. Hardly any houses in the back. The only ones that were around or coming up were on the canal or at the beach, but just a few.
Yeah.
Did.
That was, and it was probably pretty dark in there at night.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, good times. Well, thank you so much for sitting and talking with us and sharing your story of the gray man. And people need to be aware that, if we have another storm coming, that to look out for a friendly ghost that might warn you to leave.
Yeah.
I just finished interviewing weatherman Frank Johnson the other day, and he said we should be good to go for no more hurricanes this season. So,
well, let's keep our fingers crossed.
Let's keep our fingers crossed. That's right. Okay.
I was thinking just yesterday, I think it was, that we still got almost another month before the season.
That's what he said. Well, it's officially over, that we have one more month. So let's hope.
Well, we had a hurricane pop up in December a couple of years ago, so.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, but it wasn't, nothing ever came of it, but it still developed enough.
Sammy, I just want to throw this in real quick. As a realtor, buyers often ask or tell me or request, I don't want to live in a flood zone. So, and you have to kind of educate them that every place is a flood zone. There's every place is some kind of flood zone, even whether you know it or not. And obviously, some properties are more at risk than others, but the benefit of living here is greater than the risk.
Apparently. Some people, as they age, would just get tired of the evacuations and the constant threats year after year after year and all that. And after a while, I think people get worn down from it. Like in Hugo, a lot of people just quit, took their insurance money and quit. Went home, took their toys and went home. By the way, too, since I'm chatting so much, is I think around the turn of the century, since you missed telling about the flood zone thing, it was described the ocean met the Waccamaw River.
That was not Hazel, though.
No, this was way back in the turn of the century sometime, maybe even the 1890s or something.
There was some story about Brook Green Gardens and some of the people that got caught and swept away in that storm.
So apparently, talking about flood zone, that would mean the whole Waccamaw Neck was a flood zone. Anything.
That's right.
So
and some people have asked in the past, why can't they evacuate to our local schools like Waccamaw Elementary or the high school? And you can't evacuate in those schools because really all the whole Waccamaw Neck, which is Debadew, Pawleys Island, Litchfield, Murrells Inlet, it's all considered a flood zone.
Yeah.
So you really need to either go far south or north and then go inward.
Yes, and I think a good bit inward. The flood zone could be anywhere from a few hundred feet from the ocean to many miles inland.
Last fall
in a bad hurricane.
That's right. Well, last fall Ian pushed in right near Debadew, and it pushed in at high tide. I have never seen water rise so fast in my life.
Yeah.
So most of the houses where we live in Debadew are built up. So the water came in. It was only because there's dirt. When you build your house, you add more dirt to your yard. So it only came up underneath our house to the first step. Out in the yard, it was like knee level, and the street was a little bit higher. But then when the tide went out and the storm was away, that water receded right back out.
Yeah.
But most of our houses that are built near water are built to take the water. They are built to withstand that.
Well, hopefully. Yeah, they have to be built 15 feet up. What's the new standard for flood?
Yeah. Well, you have to look at the 100-year flood level and what the flood.
15.6 or something like that at one time. But I think I heard now that it's more than that.
Would you believe on the same street that there are different standards for how high you have to build a house? So at my end of the street, we had to build up
Yeah.
In the middle part of Pinckney Road, those people were allowed to build on the ground. And at the other end, where the Liggins lived, they had to also build up. It's just how the topography of the land is.
Yeah, kind of hilly.
Yeah, whether you have to build up. You can't tell when you're walking down the street.
Right.
But apparently, it rises right in the middle of the street. So, but it certainly is worth living here. I love living here. I think it's safe, and I think it's beautiful. And I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. So, anything else you want to share?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, thanks for joining us, and I hope you start watching my podcast now.
I'll look into that.
Okay. You have a good evening.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
So what did you think? Did it make you a believer? Do you think the gray man exists, or is it just a figment of people's imagination? Well, whatever the case, sometimes people's homes do make it through Category 5 hurricanes, and what's the explanation for that? It's hard to say. But it is cool thinking about the gray man, or our other ghost, Alice, or any of our other ghosts that live around here, Drunken Jack, or the Doctor of Litchfield Plantation, or the Confederate soldier ghosts that go over the bridges in Georgetown. There's a lot of different ghosts. Because I guess this area was just settled so long ago, one of the first places to be settled in North America by European settlers. Obviously, the Native Americans were already here. But it's just some good stories to pass on to your children. So we hope you enjoyed episode 16. We hope you're going to have a great weekend. We hope your football teams win. We hope you have a great Halloween and get more treats than tricks. And until we meet again, may God bless you and have a great week. See you soon.